All it took to help the reclusive, friendless, depressed 52-year-old woman to overcome her depression and be described as the African Violet Queen of Milwaukee, who was loved by all, was to tell her to give away plants. This may sound strange, and you may be wondering what giving away plants has to do with treating depression. And on the surface, it does sound like an unusual choice of treatment, and one which you might think isn't taught to psychiatrists and psychologists as a standard treatment approach for treating depression. And you'd obviously be right. It doesn't say in any book, treat depression by encouraging the client to give away plants. But it does reveal a deeper perspective which can be held when treating psychological challenges. The first consideration in dealing with patients, clients or subjects is to realise that each of them is an individual. There are no two people alike. No two people understand the same sentence in the same way. And so, in dealing with people, you try not to fit them into your concept of what they should be. You should try to discover what their concept of themselves happens to be. While lecturing in Milwaukee, the famed psychiatrist Milton Erickson was asked whether he would help a 52-year-old lady who'd been experiencing depression for 9 months. The lady was described as not getting on with her sister, independently wealthy and very religious. Erickson was told that she had staff coming in to do the various household chores and that the woman just stayed at home in a big house and went to church. She didn't have friends. She would attend church and slip away quietly so as not to interact with people. Erickson was only going to be in Milwaukee for the day, so he couldn't take the woman on as a client, but he agreed that he would visit her and see if there's anything that he could do to help. He visited the woman in the late afternoon before he left Milwaukee. He explained who he was and asked if he could be taken on a tour of her house. He described that he observed that she was a very wealthy woman who lived alone, idle and attending church, but keeping to herself. As he continued the tour room by room, they came across a room where Erickson noticed 3 African violet plants and a potting pot with a leaf in it being sprouted as a new plant. At that point, Erickson knew what therapy might help the woman. When Erickson saw the 3 African violet plants, he told the woman, "I want you to go and buy every African violet plant that you see for yourself. Those are yours. I want you to buy a couple of 100 gift pots. As soon as the sprouts are well rooted, for every birth announcement, you send an African violet. For every christening, for every engagement, for every wedding, for every sickness, for every death, every church bazaar." Erickson said that at one time the woman had 200 African violets, and if you have 200 African violets, you've got a day's work cut out taking care of them. When the woman passed away 20 years later, she was known as the African Violet Queen of Milwaukee. She had endless numbers of friends and was much loved. Erickson shared that all of this was from a single meeting with the woman, where all he did was to point her in the right direction and give her a little motivation. The woman did the rest of the therapy herself. He said that is the important thing about therapy. You find out the potentials that are possible for your patients, and then you encourage your patients to undertake them, and sooner or later they get all wrapped up in it. So, what can we learn from this short case study? When helping this client to overcome depression, Erickson didn't try to identify why she was depressed. His focus was on what could be done now with minimal therapist involvement to help the client to find their own way out of depression. And obviously, that is the role of a psychological therapist, to be as minimally involved in clients' lives as possible for the minimum amount of time necessary. He wanted to help the client to change their patterns of behaviour to something healthier. He wanted to help them to get unmet innate emotional needs met, because generally this would help the person to stop being depressed. The innate emotional needs include giving and receiving attention, having good mind-body connection, having purpose and goals, belonging to a wider community, having stimulation and creativity, feeling understood and emotionally connected to others, having a sense of control and independence, having a sense of security, having a sense of status in a social group, and having a sense of competence and achievement. How much any one needs to be met is unique to the individual, but we all have these needs, and when they aren't being met to the level that we require, or are being met inappropriately or perhaps over met, then this can lead to problems and to maintaining problems. In this case, the woman had independence and security, and with the simple intervention of having the woman grow and share plants, she met many of her unmet needs, giving and receiving attention, having purpose and goals, belonging to a wider community, which she may have had to some extent by regularly attending church already, despite not engaging with the community, feeling connected to others, and may well have started to develop relationships where she would feel more understood by others, developing a sense of status within a social group and having a sense of competence and achievement, again something which she may already have felt to some extent from growing the African violets. Erickson's intervention was also something which took what the woman was already doing and worked with this, rather than trying to impose something entirely new upon her. She was interested in growing these plants. They required a lot of care to grow them effectively. She already attended church, so the intervention built on these areas as something which might then open up the possibility for the woman to progress out of depression herself. This mindset of looking at what innate emotional needs are currently not being met or are being inappropriately met, and thinking about what parts of our life we could expand or use to help us to get those needs met in a healthy way, can be an effective way of overcoming various challenges. It can work with a wide range of areas, from depression to addiction, from OCD to weight loss. The idea is, when you're struggling with a problem and thinking about what you can do to move forward from that problem, take a look at your innate emotional needs. How are they being met? What you are looking for are needs which are not being met, or are being met inappropriately. For example, being met by or in relation to the problem itself, or being overmet, which could be connected to the problem. Once you've identified needs which are not met, overmet, or inappropriately met, you can then think about what you do already, which you could build on to get those needs met in a healthy and balanced way, to essentially tackle the problem by sidestepping it. For example, it could be smoking to meet the mind-body connection need, where you perhaps smoke to relax and reduce stress, and so you find an alternative, like a breathing technique of breathing with out-breaths longer than in-breaths. So you're essentially taking the breathing that a smoker does when they smoke, which is part of the process which triggers relaxation, and just doing that without the cigarettes. It could be that you smoke to take breaks to reduce stress. So when you get cravings, you still take a break, but do something other than smoking, like grabbing a drink or taking a short walk and stretching your legs for a while, or going outside and relaxing, breathing in fresh, clean air and being out in daylight. Perhaps you smoke to socialise, to meet your need to give and receive attention, or perhaps to meet the need to feel a connection with others. So you take breaks and mix with others, but maybe take a drink outside with you when mixing rather than cigarettes. It could be having an overbearing relative who won't give you time to yourself, so you have your need to give and receive attention overmet. So you find a behaviour that you already do, like perhaps an activity or a hobby that makes you more unavailable, like perhaps swimming, and you do this, which reduces how much attention you have with that person, making the balance more in line with what you want it to be. And you may have chosen a behaviour which perhaps helps to increase meeting other needs which may have been lacking, like keeping fitter and so meeting the mind-body connection need. or being creative and meeting the stimulation and creativity need, and perhaps the competence and achievement need, or just not giving and receiving so much attention from that person and now having greater control over the situation, which may increase the sense of control and independence, which could have been impacted by that overbearing relationship. It could be that you struggle socially but enjoy reading, and so you start making time to regularly visit a library or a coffee shop, or perhaps a coffee shop in a bookshop, so that it encourages others over time to engage with you and socialise with you, rather than you instigating socialising, because people occasionally comment on what you're reading, and maybe having that regular place that you visit, the staff get to know you and start to engage in more social conversations without you having to be the one that starts the conversations for yourself. As a parent, it could be that you have a child or teenager engaging in risk-taking behaviours because they find it exciting and they get a sense of status from them, yet the child or teen also likes a specific sport. So maybe you encourage them to do more of the sport so that they get the excitement and status from that, and then they reduce the risk-taking behaviours without the parent trying to address this directly in a challenging and confrontational way, which, especially for a teenager, may well increase the chances of them doing that risk-taking behaviour. So when you look at problems from this perspective of observing the uniqueness of the individual or of yourself, of strengths and interests, and what positive areas of life could be built on to appropriately meet the needs which are being impacted by the presenting problem, you can then often find solutions to relieving the problem without having to try to fight directly with the problem itself. This isn't a magical panacea. Sometimes it can be a challenge to find what intervention could be helpful. Other times there are missing skills which the person could do with learning, or the person may not be motivated to engage in therapy or in making any changes to help themselves. Or they may need to look at gaining understanding or alternative perspectives on something, or a wide number of other reasons. But it can be an effective way of thinking about things in a large number of situations. Here at the Mind Changers, we aim to help people change their mind to change their life. If this has been helpful or interesting, then feel free to give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And finally, have you ever given this idea a go for yourself or for others? If so, what were the results that you had? Share them in the comments below. I'll be interested to read them and perhaps engage in conversation about them. And thanks for watching.